Hang on. Repeat his question so I can record it.
They were wondering how long they can keep the ice in the ice houses. I never got involved at any time for cutting because I was too young, but I remember I seen pictures where they were cutting the ice, and they would cut it in like blocks, maybe 2 feet square, and however thick the ice was on the pond.
Wow.
But that would
That's pretty thick.
they had special ice houses
Hi, honey.
that
Love
were
you. Bye, Sonia.
insulated with sawdust in the walls, so they would keep ice quite a long time.
Yeah. All summer?
Can I say something?
Sure.
I remember when I lived in Clearfield in the third grade, I would have to ride my bike down to the ice place that you talk about where they had ice and bring back a block of ice to put in our ice box. No fridges. We didn't have a fridge.
So on into the 60s, people continued to call that thing in the kitchen the ice box, even
Yes.
though it wasn't.
Yes. That's what they called the fridges for a while.
Yeah.
Was an ice box.
So, one of the things that I've been curious about since I've bothered you both a lot and asked questions about when you were growing up, what's the difference of how you, at that time, okay, 5 years and younger, of how you lived, how you celebrated Christmas? Was yours more commercialized because you were in a big city, and yours was more family and personal because you were out there? Have you guys ever talked about it or thought about it?
No.
Uh,
I remember that the big deal was going over to the church house, and that was so fun. The night before Christmas.
What did you do?
I don't remember except being there
Okay.
and waiting for Santa Claus to come. That was so fun. We ate. Yeah, they had tables set up and we ate.
Okay. Dad?
well, let me tell you, times were different then. When I was born, I was born. First of all, I was born on my great granddad's original homestead, which might not mean too much to everybody, but
Where is it?
it was in Clearfield. If you know where the 700 South comes, that's the south exit that comes off the freeway, and
I
there's
think everybody has a picture of the house.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't explain where it was.
on the lane. When I said the lane, my cousin, who was the same age as me, there was 4 of us that were cousins that went to school together through all the way through, because we were all George, I think his birthday was in
November.
February.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then mine was in April, and Chuck, who we called him Chuck, his name was really Darlene, and he was the last. He died just recently, maybe in the last 15 years. He was the last surviving grandchild of Emily and Richard, who was the first settlers in Clearfield. He was actually, he should have been in my dad's generation, if that makes sense. I remember when we were little, and him, we were playing down at my house, and I remember my dad coming and telling him that his brother had was in an accident at Davis High School in the shop, and he was burnt quite bad, and he died.
What happened?
Oh, I'm sorry.
What happened then he died?
He was working on his car in the shop. In fact, he was underneath it doing something, and somebody spilled some gasoline, and somebody else had an acetylene torch going,
Oh my God.
and he got burnt quite bad and did not survive. But I remember my dad coming and telling us that Dean had died, and I remember Chuck saying, "Oh, you're just teasing. He really didn't." But anyway, at that time, my first recollection is we lived in a 2-room house. One room was kitchen, living room, front room, whatever you want to call it, and my parents' bedroom.
That's the same house that you grew up in?
Yes.
So, where'd you guys sleep?
Well, let me tell you a little bit before that. My grandmother's house had a kitchen. I'm guessing it was somewhere 18, 20 feet square. The kitchen was big. She had a small living room.
I'm gonna tie your hands down.
She had a small living room, and then there was a little room off of that was our bathroom is bigger than that little room was, and that's my uncle, my dad's youngest brother, Eloy. He was in some kind of an accident and he had a broken back, and he had a cast on. And I remember him taking a fly swatter with the wire handle and reaching down in to scratch because it was itching where he couldn't reach. But that was his bedroom, and I assume, I guess, at the time I probably knew, my grandmother slept in the living room, what they called the living room, because there was only the 3 rooms. And they had 10 kids there. In our house, we had the 2 rooms, a big wood stove in the kitchen, which served as both heat and cooking. Then later, I don't remember anything particular about. I remember my uncle come with his team of horses and a what they call a slip scraper, and dig out the west side of our house when my dad built an addition. We had another bedroom on that floor, a bathroom, and a separate kitchen. And my sisters, I had the only other bedroom besides my parents, because I was the only boy, and I was spoiled. I had 2 sisters older than me and 2 sisters.
So spoiled.
I had 2 sisters older than me and 2 sisters younger. Right now, I got one sister left, and she's the one that was just younger than me, Alice.
Thank you, Tara.
We didn't get a lot for Christmas. We probably got one major thing. My dad worked for the railroad. I had an uncle. That was the only job he ever had was railroad. The railroad was big back then. I remember my dad saying that when he hired on, they went out and they had to replace the rail, so they sent it out on this little cart on the railroad track, and it was a hand cart. You had to move it. You had to work a pump, just electric pump, to motivate it. But they pulled, another car behind it that had the rail on it. And they replaced the rail, and then they would have a metal plate that laid on the ties, and the rail would lay in that plate, and then they would drive railroad spikes down through the holes in the plate, and the heads were they were not centered on the spike, but they had special hammers that would, probably the head was like that long because the rail was 6 inches tall, and you had to have something that long to get it down past the top of the rail. So they would have to drive these spikes in, and the head would hold the rail in place. Railroading was very specific. When they had something that was, I don't even remember what they called it, but after they got one rail set, they would set the other rail with this thing, that it was the width of the engine, the wheels on the engine would fit, which was, I've read where that was for some reason that was the same size as the chariots they used to use hundreds of years before. When the train would come through, because it was about, maybe a little over 100 yards from our house, you'd hear it because they had to whistle at every crossing. But they burnt coal at that time, that was before diesel. They burnt coal, so there was what they called cinders. And if you were close to the railroad track, when the train came by, you would get these cinders that would land on you and burn for they were hot.
Then you'd be Cindy.
And you would be Cindy. Yes.
Were they steam motors?
Steam, yes.
Power in it?
They were, there was a overpass, it's still there, it's on Antelope Drive, that went over the railroad tracks. And there were a couple of girls that when the trains would come through and go under there with all that smoke, and then they'd come out the other side, and then there'd be a big puff of smoke come up. There were a couple of girls right there because there was a walkway on each side of the overpass where the pedestrians could walk. But there were two girls that were there. Thought that was neat, because when that train come over or come underneath there, that smoke would come up. And they only did that once, I think, because it was so smoky, they couldn't breathe, and at least the one staggered out into traffic and was hit and
Oh
killed.
my gosh.
Christmas thoughts. Christmas. Happy.
Happy?
Yeah.
Sorry.
None of that stuff. No more.
I haven't thought about this stuff a long time. I remember I had later I had a paper route that I would go down in through the Navy base. I had a pass to get through the Navy base, which is now the Freeport Center. I'd go all the way through because the main gate was on the south on Antelope Drive. And I would go through the line, get out there, and then I would stand there and sell Ogden Standard newspapers for a nickel a piece. And every paper I sold, I got 2.5 cents. So
Was that a lot of money?
that was then, yes.
Nice.
How old were you?
At that time, I was probably 13, 14.
So, Mom, that makes me kind of curious about you. Did you do anything to make money when you were a young kid?
Yes, I babysat.
Did you babies?
Before that, I remember when the Second World War started, we were living in Talmadge. We went out into the fields where there was no garbage collector. They go out into the fields, and we picked up everything that was rubber and old tires, shoes, everything that was rubber, and we got paid for it, for them to use for things in the war.
Oh,
Yeah.
so how? I've kind of wondered this. How did that work? Because we're not on a coast, so they didn't make things and ship them, did they?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I just know that we did that and it was fun because we were getting paid for that stuff.
And we were gathering metal.
Okay.
For the metal drive.
So did you make good money doing that, Mom?
I thought it was really good. It was money.
Where's more money than sitting at home?
Yes.
Yeah.
But you could buy a lot. I was telling you, my dad went to work for the railroad. His first pay, he was getting $1 a day.
When was that?
That would have been, oh gosh, probably around 1930, almost 100 years ago. But I remember him saying that somebody from the office came out specifically to see him on the railroad to tell him, from now on, you have to be the one to sign your checks, not your wife and not your mother. You have to sign your checks.
Was there a problem with forgeries or anything?
Yes, there was a guy I used to work for, his name was Thornley, and he would forge, and he spent time in prison. And the bad thing was he would come home and he would be home, and all of a sudden he's going back to prison because he forged again.
Oh.
I worked,
Oh my gosh.
his two brothers had cattle that they came down past our place to get to where their cattle, and they fed their cattle, Herefords, all year long. And I worked for them stacking hay and that, but, and one day, coincidentally, when I was down at the gallery, and there was a guy come through, and when I got talking to him, he says he was from Texas. He came up to visit his relatives that were out in Clearfield, and he was a son of one of the two brothers that I worked for, as it turned out. But,
Wow. That's
and
coincidental.
coincidental, yeah. When they built the naval base, there was one school in Clearfield. It was a 2-story building, had 6 classrooms, first grade to 6th grade, and there. They took our schoolhouse for office space while they were doing the construction of which is now the Freeport Center, but it's a lot bigger than it was when it was the naval base. They bused us part of one year to Clinton, to the school there, and then the next year they bused us to Layton, to the school there. And some nights, some days, we would walk up the railroad tracks to get home from Layton.
Glad you were safe.
Yeah.
Did you make it okay?
Yeah, I think so.
Did you have any close calls?
No.
Oh, good.
It was fun to take a penny and put it on the rail, and then when the train would come by, you go pick it up afterwards, and it's all squished out. But then we used to say, oh, that's illegal. That's defacing the coin.
We used to do that too.
Mom, have you thought of anything that you wanted to say?
Yes. I remember also during the war that you go in the store and it was so strange because there was no candy. There was only a few essential things. There was nothing that
Nothing fun and good and
no sugar. I don't know why. There wasn't.